Thank you very much, and it's a great honor to be able to present here. And I want to frame my discussion this evening. It is evening here. How this all came about, and I, in a sense, find myself a little bit like a fish out of water with the folks here at the Congress, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to review my work, offer some phenomenal suggestions, as well as allow me to be here presenting. Let me give you a bit of background first on how this topic has come to be for me. For 20 years, I've been living and teaching in the United Arab Emirates, teaching communication theory. And for over a decade of that time, I was also a radio talk show host in the evenings on a station called Dubai Eye, where for 2 hours I was able to engage with people from all over the country. Well, at the end of this whole process, when this station changed its format, I went from doing radio to doing podcasting. And in this process of going there, it got me asking a lot of questions about how does podcasting fit into our media regulation, into our media funding, and is it different here in the United Arab Emirates than it is from where I'm from, Canada? Is it different from the United States? Is it different from Europe? And what's going on? And that is what fueled the start of this question, and really a big space of questioning, lots of questioning. And ultimately where my paper has led to is less of an answer and more of we need to do a lot more research, and we need to start asking a lot of questions, and we need to start asking these questions now. And what I've come to discover ultimately, and I think thinking about some of the presentations I've already heard at the Congress, unfortunately my Portuguese is not as good as I thought it was. My Spanish is a little bit better. But one of the things that becomes really interesting right off the bat thinking about podcasting, as we think about film, as we think about television, and as we think about these other medias that we're engaging with, is podcasting is really new. Podcasting, generally speaking, if you follow, I would say, the godfathers of writing on podcasting, Spinelli and Dan, podcasting 2003. That's when this whole media form really started. It's fueled by technology. So the fact that we can stream, the fact that we can share online has created this way of taking audio content and delivering it in a different way. And this is where things get kind of interesting, because podcasting as a form of media is very new. And it does obviously share similarities to radio, but it's not radio. And the big difference that we start thinking about as we start thinking about podcasting is we start to realize that radio is wallpaper. It's audio wallpaper. You turn it on, it hangs out with you. Podcasting is not audio wallpaper. Podcasting is very specific in that content, in how you listen to it, how it's put together, and how you or us as the consumers have control over that. And so suddenly what starts to go on in my mind is I start thinking, well, hold on. So what's going on with podcasting and how does all this work? We know that there are millions of them. And in fact, this becomes an added problem when we start talking about podcasting, is because there's lots. And the numbers are interesting, but the numbers are incomplete. And the numbers I'm putting together for you here are from Nielsen, they're from Apple, and a conglomeration of sources that would suggest, we get about 2 million podcasts, 48 million episodes globally. But that therein becomes the problem, because unlike other forms of media where it's very specific and it's very regionally defined and it's regulated and it's rather expensive to do and podcasting is not, it's user generated for the most part. Now, I know someone's going to say, hold on a second, it's not just user generated. And this is where podcasting becomes rather interesting, because you do get what we would like to call affiliated content. So those people at radio stations who are doing audio things or video things, who take their audio and put it into a podcast, that is one form of it. But you also get a huge amount of user-generated content. And where the numbers start to become interesting, and when we start looking at the United Arab Emirates, it becomes even more interesting, because we've got some interesting numbers and the number of population that listens to podcasts, and we can take that globally. And when you look at, say, I use the comparison with the United States, just because it's easy to find that data, and that again becomes another problem. Different countries collecting data in different ways, or people aren't looking at it at all. They're not considering it. It's just not on their radar. Why? It's new, and it's developing fast. My big worry, and this is going right to the end of what I'm talking about here, and this is the invitation that I spoke about, is we need to start thinking about this, or we're going to find ourselves in a position 20 years from now where we're going to say, where did we go wrong? And how do we know? What do we know about why podcasts were being created, and how did they impact on our culture, and how are they part of that culture? Where this all fits in back into where I am in the United Arab Emirates is there's not a lot of data out there. So we have lots of numbers, but what we don't know is definitively how many podcasts are there here. What are people actually listening to? And when we get some of those numbers, which are there, but they're all over the place. So when I say they're there and they're all over the place, as we know, podcasting can be hosted in different ways. So you can put something up on Spotify, as I do. My Spotify account at this moment is being distributed to 10 different sources, including iTunes, including Google Podcasts, including Deezer. None of these different sources are putting their numbers together. So when we start saying, well, how many podcasts are there in the UAE? No one really knows. And how many are there in the world? No one really knows. What we're really good at is monetizing things, or trying to figure out how we can make some money from them. And this is for me the real challenge of podcasting. And again, that issue that I've come across here is our numbers tend to reflect our consumers. So our numbers tend to reflect how many people are listening to podcasts. What language are they listening to them in? How long do they like to listen to? Because we can find all that out. But what we're not asking is, well, why are we making podcasts? Why is podcasting important? What about the creators? This is a topic, and this is a part of this question that's not being addressed. And while we have some podcasts we can say we know what's going on, and Spinelli and Dan talk about this, and they look at the fact that there are no really good methodologies for investigating podcasts yet. We're talk a lot about who's looking at something and what they're looking at, but we're not looking at what it is they're looking at. We're not asking the questions, why did the creator make it? Why did someone put together that content? And we're definitely not asking and suggesting, okay, affiliated content, that content that comes from radio shows and other things, versus user-generated content, non-affiliated content. How do they fit into the cultural realm of society? If they're a conversation, if they're talking about things that are going on around us, if they're maybe understood as oral histories, how do they fit in? Are we supporting it? Do we want to support it? How do we differentiate the delivery system from the content? And with about 18 years of podcasting around us, it's so new that for the most part, we're not asking that question. We're not thinking about that questions. When we talk about what is culture and is podcasting part of that, when I ask people about this, they kind of gloss over. And we run into other problems then if you start looking at it in the context here. As a Canadian in the United Arab Emirates, is my content cultural for the Emirates, or is it not cultural for the Emirates because I'm an expat and I'm a Canadian. Is my content Canadian content? So you can see the issue becomes rather interesting. The point of all this being, podcasting is, from the research that I'm looking at and from the research that is out there, which is pretty slim, there's no question that there is a difference between what we get from podcasting and what we get from our other audio media. From the way it's delivered, from the way we listen to it, from the way we interact with it. There's no question that there is a cultural element to it. But what we're really missing the boat on, and where the research needs to be expanded, and that's all that I set out to do in this paper, is we need to start doing it. And it's not being done yet. And to me, again, based on, I'm going to wrap it up here, Rita, based on everything that we've been talking about so far at the Congress and what we're looking at, is we, as Spinelli and Dan say, I'll go back to them, we're in the golden age of podcasting, and to not engage with it as researchers, we're going to look back in 20 years and we're going to regret it. And we're going to say, why didn't we? And I hope that isn't where we end up. Thank you very much.